All right, we're back. We are COMP305 in the fall 2017 semester, and this is week 8, part 1 of our broadcast. We're talking about Unity 2D and animations. Like I said to the class that's here, we will be having your presentations happen next week. So the people who are doing their first playables, who haven't done the first playables, which is all of you, my hope is that we're going to be doing that next week. So please make sure your group members are all present if possible for next week so that we can do the presentations. My expectation is that we'll see the your whatever you have in your games up to date. Again, take a look at the requirements. There is no, it's not necessarily required for you to have everything in your game yet, obviously, because you may not have all your graphics, you may not have all your mechanics, but your main mechanic, the thing that makes your game unique, is what I'm really looking for. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So for now, I'm pulling up Unity 2017. My version is 0.20F3. If you haven't updated Unity for a while, you may want to, if you don't have 2017 for whatever reason, please get that. I'm going to make a new project, right? Or actually, you know what? Instead of doing that, let's see if I can pull up my Unity project from before. I do have our mail pilot project we've been working with, and I want to kind of extend that. Let's go back into COMP305 here. That's okay. Maybe I'll just download it. So I'll download it from GitHub, right? Because we have our stuff on GitHub, and as you should as well. So I'm going to go to GitHub, and we're going to go to Centennial, which is where we have our stuff. And we have our mail pilot demo. This is the one that I'm using, so you can also download it from there, right? And I'm going to just download this project. Now, there's two ways to download it. When you're using version control, if I just download, just to remind you guys, so here's a question for you guys, because this will probably be part of your test, which I'll probably have a short test, like a little in-house assignment that I'll have for you guys, not next week, but the week after, right? Like I mentioned earlier in class today. You'll be required to put your stuff up on GitHub. So question for you, if I download my GitHub project, by downloading the zip, do I get my commits? Yes or no? Do I get my commits? Yes or no? So true or false? I get my commits, true or false? False. You don't get any commits. All you do is get a clean project. And that's good if you're downloading it to get a clean project, but it's bad if you want to download your partner's work and then continue and add a commit, right? So please don't just download. If I click download zip right now, and let's suppose I was going to, kind of collaborate with somebody else. Let's say this was me, somebody else, right? Then I wouldn't be able to collaborate. I could just download and run it, but it wouldn't work exactly like the way I want. So what I want to do instead is I want to clone my project, right? Clone my project from GitHub. So I want to copy this, put it on the clipboard. And then what I can do is I can use my command line tools. So I'm just going to go to my command line tools here on Windows, right? And I'm going to go to the desktop, right? So there's my desktop. And I'm going to go git clone, that's the command, and then the path, right? So if I right click, it should give me the path, right, to my Git repository. There it is. And if everything goes well, if I press enter, then I'll log in and download my Git project. Now, there is something I got to tell you about this. Notice it just doesn't take that long, but you can tell how big it is right now. We got like what, probably 50 megs from what I'm guessing this project is for a little game that we made, this little mail pilot game. And because it has additional assets and so on that we put up on GitHub, it's not just the. I think we also made a WebGL build. One of the things I've asked you to do is produce a WebGL build for your game. Even though we're not doing web game stuff, WebGL allows us to play your game together, right? And I also talked to you about putting your game eventually up on the web, right, and producing it with GitHub pages. I already have mine up there, right, on my website. But what I'm going to do today is just download and run on a PC, even though I built this thing on the Mac, right? So we'll talk about how that is. Now, there's a difference between this and the Mac. The difference is that the PC, wow, it's way more than 100 megs. I have to make a PC build now, right? And before I was making a Mac build, so that's a whole different thing. I'm going to make a PC build, and I'm going to make a WebGL build, and I want to do that so I have kind of a cross-platform game that I'm making. And this is great because now I've showed you how to make a Mac game. I've been working on the Mac for several weeks, and now I'm on a PC, and I'm just going to port it over, and it should run just the same, right? So that's a great thing about Unity. It's a kind of code once, deploy everywhere kind of example, right? That's a great platform for us, right? Wow, it's huge. What did I put up on this thing? 300 megs. So as we're waiting, so that's the way to do it. Now this way it'll give me, like I said, after this is done, and again I apologize for the delay, but it takes some time when you're downloading a whole project. But it's good to see it as well for you guys if you've never done it before. It gives us a chance to look and see how you can get a project from GitHub and how you can add to the commits right from another system. This also works well if you work at home. You have a really good computer at home, but you don't want to. You have some extra. I don't know. Maybe you have a big screen. You like working from home. You like building something at there or whatever. And then you come to school and you want to load your project, and this is a way to do that. And you can continue developing on your project. And when you get home, after you made your pushes to GitHub, you just pull everything back into your project at home. Of course, the other way if you're doing that is to use something like TeamViewer and remotely control your computer from here, right? That's another way you could accomplish that. So for example, if I wanted to work on a Mac, because I have a Mac at home, I could just tunnel into the Mac from here, and then I'm good to go. I can use my Mac, right? For whatever reason, if I needed to. Okay, let's try this out and see this thing finally when it downloads. 500 megs and counting, my friends, right? For this little Mailpilot project. By the way, I'm not surprised too much in terms of the bloat, and the reason for this is because Unity has a bunch of files that it puts together, and the more assets you pull down from the asset store and so on, it adds to the amount of bloat for your project when it comes to how to make your project. Again, this is quite small compared to Unreal. If you're using an Unreal project, you're building something in Unreal, it'd probably be double this size. So I think if I was going to compare between Unity and Unreal, and again, this is the commentary just to take up the time while we're downloading. I don't know if you guys have anyone used Unreal before? Nobody? Oh yeah, you've used it? So it's not as good when it comes to 2D, in my opinion. I think when it comes to making 2D games, Unreal doesn't have as much polish and tools as Unity does right now anyway. And you can still do the same thing with Unreal. It takes a little bit extra effort. However, it has great lighting. If you're going to do 3D games, I don't know. I like Unreal's lighting system a lot more still, even with the new Unity stuff than Unity. So if you're doing 3D games, I still think Unreal has really awesome lighting, and the way it works is different. The other thing I like is that you can use your C++, which means if you really wanted to, which is kind of good. There, finally finished in terms of speed. Okay, cool. So we've got our project downloaded. Now this is the thing. So the next step is, okay, I've got my project downloaded. Here it is. How does it look for me? Well, it looks like this, right? And we're good. It looks like this, right? But the thing to note is I have this .git folder. So I wanted to show you this as well. So Unity or any kind of Git repository should have a .git folder. And the .git folder, this is where all the changes are. Take a look. 656 megs are in my .git folder. Hello, right? Why is that? Because it keeps all your changes. That's where all your changes are stashed in your .git folder. So it's massive, right? And that's why we have things like git ignore files and so on, because we want to make sure, like, next time I upload to GitHub, it won't be 600 megs because I already have it all. It's just the changes that are sent up. So the first project, the first changes take a little bit of time, especially when you keep adding more builds. In my builds folder, you notice I have a WebGL build. This WebGL build should work for us too. So if I just go into my WebGL build folder now, and if I double click on my index.html, now it won't work with Chrome. Chrome, of course, the security preferences in Chrome will not allow me to just double click and run. For example, if I just double click this thing, Let's try this again. And if I say Chrome, right, and I press OK, it's just going to say, man, I don't know what you're doing. It shouldn't run Unity in Chrome. And the reason for this is because Chrome's security preferences do not allow that to happen. All right, but that's not going to stop us because we can use Firefox or something else. So I can kind of, I can say open with, and I could just choose Firefox, right? And hopefully Firefox's security preferences haven't changed. No. And we can see the Unity build that I made on the Mac right here on the PC, and just by downloading it. So this is what we had last day. We kind of had this little, mail pilot where you had the game, explosions, right? Firing. So that's what the game was about. We kind of put that together. We didn't have any kind of, the explosion sound was there, but we don't have explosions. And this is our build. We do not have a PC build, which I'll be making with you today. And then we don't have a Mac build yet, which I'll be making with you in another week. Okay, cool. So that's what we get. We download everything. One thing to note is if I was to go into my command prompt again, this is just tooling for now. So if I say CD space, and if I drag and drop my folder, you can see that I can get right into that folder right away without having to swim there by going CD space and full path. I don't have to worry about that. I can do kind of a directory command, dir, and I can see what the project is. And if I did a git log, I can see that these are all the commits that I have from GitHub. So it keeps track of all the commits that I did. And then you can see the last day we worked together on this thing. All right, so that's that. I can also do git status. Git status tells me, hey, is there anything left to commit? Have I made anything different, that I have to put up? If I added files or whatever, and nothing has been different on this thing. I'm going to keep this window up because if we want to make commits, I'm going to do it from here, right? All right, cool. Now I'm going to open a project, and I'm going to target the project that I have on the desktop. So I'm going to go to my desktop, go into Mail Pilot, and I'm just going to select this folder. Now this should load everything into the project, and if there's any changes from the Unity version that I have to the one I'm downloading, then what happened to Unity? There it is. There she is. She's just hiding, right? And then hopefully we'll be able to download and install stuff. If there's any change, like I said, from my version that I had on the Mac to the my Windows machine, then it'll come up. You'll be able to see the changes right here. It'll say, converting, your last version of the editor was this version, and now we're using this version. Do you want to convert, right? Especially if it's an older version. Oh yeah, last time I also talked about using Texture Packer. Texture Packer is a great tool that we kind of use, again, review, where we can use it to make texture atlases for Unity as opposed to, yeah, there you go. As opposed to just using Unity's built-in Sprite sheet management system. Okay, so there we go. So now I'm kind of using a variant of the 2x3 layout. Notice that there's different layouts on the right side for Unity, and I mean 2x3 is one that comes with Unity, but I want to make this layout my custom layout. So how do I do that? Because I want you guys to know how to do this too if you're going to customize your environment. So what I can do is I can save my layout, right? And I can call it whatever I want. It's that simple. Let's call this layout, preferred. Right? So now if you notice, I'm using the preferred layout. So I called it, right? But if I wanted to go back to 2x3, I could do that. This is the standard 2x3 layout. Or if I wanted to go to the default layout, which looks like this, I can do that too. I can switch back and forth. And why is that? Why does Unity give you a chance to switch back and forth between different layouts? Because everyone works differently. So if you and a partner are working and the partner likes a certain preset, and you don't want him to mess with yours, get him to make a layout, right? As an example on his, and that has nothing to do with yours. When he saves it, you can just kind of have that new layout. So I'm going to go back to my layout, which is preferred, and you can see that I get my layout back the way it is. All it is just relays out the toolbars back to the way it is. So now that I'm back here, the other thing I'd like to do with Unity is, because I've just downloaded this from the Mac version, I just want to play, right? So if I play the game, it should play in my on the machine just as simple as playing on the Mac. Again, this is the beautiful thing about Unity, right? It works everywhere. The editor is different. I mean, this is the PC version, right? But at the end of the day, it's the same, right? The end of the game is the same. There we go. Okay. So we did a small animation. If you notice, I've got an animations folder. So I want to go zero in on this for a second, right? And in my enemy animations, we have right now my plane animation and my enemy animation. So if you notice that over here, it's going to show you the plane. The plane is also going to have its propeller move, right? So it's going to turn off the sounds so we don't have to hear sounds. Oops, I mean turn off the sounds. I want to mute the sounds in my game. So when I play it, I don't want to hear the sounds for now. But I want to, when I run it, right, I want you to take a look at the enemy plane. It's kind of hard to see. Let's pause it for a second when it comes up. Well, oh, didn't have a chance to do that fast enough. Let's try it again. Restart and, okay, pause. That's not the great place. Okay, there. So if you notice, again, this is in real-time play, right? You can see that this is where the plane is, right? And again, I'm looking at the game window, the great game viewport, right? And this is, take a look at his propeller. So if I start it up again, you can see that the propeller is changing a little bit, that animation, but it's really kind of hard to see. So what I want to do today is make a bigger animation. Let's make an explosion animation, right? By using the same, image data that we had before, okay? One thing to also remind you of is, if you look at the plane, there's two animators here, enemy animator and plane animator, right? So if I go to the plane animator, the animator, if you see the animator, it's actually a finite state machine, an FSM is what it's called, right? So it kind of gives you these different nodes. That's what I want to think about. In fact, what they really are, and under the hood, is something called blend nodes, right? So I have this first animation, and this is my first animation clip. By the way, Unity 3D works the exact same way, right? So there's a transition. See this little line here? There's a transition that goes from the entry point to my animation to my plane animation itself, right? This little line here, right? Now there's no transition because it's the first thing. But if I had another animation, let's say my plane exploded or something like that, like the exploding plane. I don't have that. But then I can make a transition between the regular plane animation and some kind of other animation over here, right? Similarly, if I want to look at my enemy animator, right, so this is my plane animator. If I look at my animator, you can see that this also has an entry point, but it has its own finite state machine, okay? What I mean by that is it can have several states. So if you're making a game and you have a character who has a walk, and when we do our platformer example, we're going to see a game that has a walk state. It might be a game that has a run state. There's a bunch of other states you can have in the game, right? And the enemy might have a different kind of pursue or flee or one of those kind of things. You can make as many of these states, or maybe he dies, the enemy dies. You can have all those animations stashed here, and each clip will have a way of almost creates a tree structure that allows you to move from one animating state to another, right? So for example, from an idle animation, you can move into kind of a run animation, right? Or one of those kind of things. So kind of a very, interesting thing that Unity has included. This used to be a separate system with Unity when it first came out, and over the years they've incorporated into the main editor. Okay, cool. So that's the animator in a nutshell. That's what it looks like. How do we create the animations? We dragged and dropped multiple images. That's what we did onto the hierarchy last time. And then what we did, once we had those images, it automatically created a clip. So this is the actual animation clip itself. In the animation clip, you can also look at the animation itself. So there's a couple windows here, right? The animator window, then their animation window. The animation window actually gives us kind of a dope sheet. By the way, there's no relation to actual doping, like woohoo, marijuana. No, it's a dope sheet. That's what it's called in the industry, right? Where the animators allow you to see the animation of the sprite. So notice that there is only a 3-frame animation for the plane. That's what it is. So it shows you the animation. Now what you could do with the dope sheet is separate the animation out, change the amount of samples, the sample rate, and a bunch of other stuff here that we haven't touched on yet. and we'll get to later. But the dope sheet's kind of cool because it shows you the animation. You can also look at curves, which is kind of neat because the animation also has, from a motion and speed, from a speed perspective, it can have its own curves. So if I click on, if there was some kind of speed control that I had here, I could see almost like a animation curve in terms of ease in and ease out. If I wanted to make a blend from one animation to another, right now we don't have anything like that. Okay, so that's a couple of little tools we're going to look at probably today, especially the animator. The animator is going to be our transition states, right? If we have any of that stuff. But for now, what I want to do is I want to create this explosion with you. So inside of the folders, I have a couple things. I have some sprites. And notice that I have a bullet we created, right, together. Here's our bullet sprite. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see them. So these are the sprites we have right now. We also have a sprite sheet, right? And we made the sprite sheet. Here's a sprite sheet. We made our sprite sheet with Texture Packer. This is it right here, right? Our sprite sheet. And if you look, it actually has all the animations broken out from the sprite sheet itself. Okay, this is the sprite sheet. So it's kind of cool. And what I want to do is I want to add some more sprites. Now, how do I make an animation, like kind of an explosion? Well, we're going to look at this 1945 asset, right? So if I kind of look in there, I want to pull this up. I'm going to go to my folder. This is actually on the operating system itself. So I'm going to go back to the desktop. I'm going to look at my folder. And inside the folder, I have some assets. Here's my assets folder for Unity. And inside my assets, I have my sprites. And inside there, I have my sprite sheet, 1945.bmp, right? I'm going to pull that up, right? And I don't want to use Paint. That's bad, right? But I want to open with my favorite program, which is probably going to be Fireworks if I can find it on the system. I'll choose another app. And let's see if I have it available, but no, we'll see the other app here. There it is. Here she is. And I always use this app to open this kind of file. I'll press OK. All right, so when I do that, I'm bringing up Fireworks. Now, I'm a subscriber to Adobe's CC suite of files. So, I mean, I have access to all of them, Photoshop and Illustrator and so on. But I find that Fireworks, like I said to you guys before, is a very simple photo editing. It was originally made for the web. So it has things like, different kinds of views you can pull up when you modify stuff and so on. But for now, I just use it mostly for photo editing. There's the tool that comes with Microsoft's Windows 10, which is the Paint 3D program. It's pretty cool, man. There's some really cool things you can do now just out of the box. If you don't want to use a commercial product like Adobe's Photoshop, there's also Krita and a bunch of other tools I mentioned before. But for now, what we want to do is I want to use Fireworks. You can use the tool of your choice. And try and do this with me, guys, because basically what you're going to do is we need to do a little bit of graphic manipulation here so you understand how this is done. Okay, so I'm going to grab this explosion graphic. So that, notice if I'm just going to zoom in here, I have these stages of the explosion. Take a look at this. So it starts off like boom, and then boom, 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 boom. Now, take a look at this. What do you think? Should I start here or should I start here? What's the animation? What's first animation frame that you would think of? I mean, I'd probably think about this as the first one. So it'll go boom. It'll show the big explosion. This is the graphic, and then it'll go boom, 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 boom. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frames of animation. That's what we want to grab. Okay. So there's this for our plane, and there's also this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the enemy plane, right? So we can make these animations. Now there's some issues. By the way, if you grab a sprite sheet from the web, or if your designer makes something like this, there's some issues with this. So what could be the issues with some of this stuff? Anybody have an idea? Come on, guys. Think about what you're seeing here. Yeah, the blue is a pain in the ass, right? Because I want to get rid of all the blue, and there's a bunch of frames. So some things to do here. One of the things I can use is the, kind of my magic wand tool like I did before. And I can kind of specify the area that I want to remove. So I'm going to kind of move in there. So I'm going to kind of scroll in there so you can see. There's the magic wand. Now, the magic wand is not bad. And there's a bit of tolerance here in fireworks, right? So it tells you how much tolerance it has. The higher the tolerance, the more the colors that it'll absorb in the magic wand, right? The lower the tolerance, the less the color variations. It means it has to be the exact color, only one color that it'll isolate, right? That's what the tolerance does. You can also decide what kind of edge, if it has a hard edge, or if you have an anti-aliased or feather edge. I don't want to use any one of these two because it'll actually include more pixels. I don't want that. So I want a kind of a hard edge for this thing, because otherwise I'll have blue pixels in there too, and I don't want that, okay? So then I'm going to just press delete, which should just delete this area, right? So if I just can make this thing work, how about that? Press it and delete. There we go. All right, so that's that one, and I'll do the same for these ones, right? Now there's some stuff in the middle, and notice that if I do it this way, right? So I'm going to zoom in here again. You can see that there's going to be some areas of blue I don't want, right? Theoretically, I could keep these areas of blue, right? Because then, you know, I'm going to have kind of a blue ocean, and the blue ocean kind of looks like this, but it might look more of a billboard than actually a real explosion. So I want to kind of get rid of this center, right? But the problem is, I'm just going to do that, there's some blue areas. So then I can increase my tolerance. If I can try and increase my tolerance, let's say to 50 or to 100, and it still might not capture everything. Oh, that's not bad. It's better. Now, this is dangerous. The higher you go, then it might capture other pixels you don't want. But we may have to do a little bit of pixel manipulation here. So done. I still have some other areas that I have to get rid of. I'm going to go zoom right in here. Oh, look. That's bad, too. I didn't notice that. But notice that there are a little bit of blue edges. I don't care. It's not going to be very noticeable, to be honest with you. This is more noticeable, this weird crap right here, right? So it is a circle, right? Kind of a circle with a little bit of a rough edge, right? I could go around here with my own pixel manipulation, like pixel by pixel, and make this a little rounder, right? Because it's going to look pretty rough right now. This will come out pixel, because we're using pixel perfect animation. Even if it's this big, you can see the edges, right? That's how big it's going to probably be in the game, right? So do I want to go clean this up more? For now, for us, no. I'm going to leave it alone. In real life, I'd probably go in pixel by pixel. I just don't have time with you guys today. And just take away all these pixels, these extra pixels that I don't need, right? How would I do that? Let's do one so you can see how it's done. I'll probably go with the eraser tool. Make sure that I'm not, I've deselected all here, because it's only selecting the areas that are, that I can do. This is way too big, so if I do this, it'll erase the whole thing. That's not good, right? But what I want to do is kind of bring this size down right to like 1, right? So you go 1, little pixel. And if I want to do any kind of pixel manipulation, I typically go with a square as opposed to a circle, right? I can zoom right in, though. I can zoom right in there typically. Let's go back to that. Move over here. And let's just zoom right in. So I'm going to kind of do one of those. So that's much better. I can see that there's more in here, and I can use my eraser just to erase pixels by pixels if I really want to go to. I might as well do it now. So you can see that, and I'll probably erase some of these gray ones too, because that doesn't make any sense, right? You can see that some of these, I got some noise after I erased some of these areas here with my magic wand tool, and now I cleaned it up so it looks a little better. Is it perfect? Hell no. You know, like I said, I probably would want a better graphic for my designer. Let's zoom up right out there again. But I don't have a designer right now. It's just me, right? So, and let me show you what happens when I use more tolerance with the blue. I have 100% tolerance, and if I use that, you can see that it also takes away some of these other areas here, right? See that? So it takes away some of the black areas as well. And if I look over at the other two, you can see that there's black mixed in with blue, and it doesn't know what to do. So the higher the tolerance, the more tolerance it has from a color variation perspective, and it'll just reduce those or remove those. Reduce this back down to about 40, which will kind of include some of those outer areas, but it's okay. Kill this part, so kill this part. This one, I want to increase the tolerance again. I'll put this back up to 100 for the inside, right? And again, I have that same issue. And unfortunately, now that we've started with pixel manipulation, we have no choice but to, it'll look weird. You'll have this weird ring now. It'll be very visible because I've taken it away. So I have to go back in there and do that same thing that I did last time. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. Right, it won't take long. now that we have our way of doing it. And I'll just, again, just delete these pixels really quickly because they look really ugly. And you'll have to do this too sometimes. You'll grab some graphic from the web, you know, again, not for use. You're not going to sell it or anything, right? It's just for learning. But you want to make it somehow half decent. And sometimes, or maybe you have a graphic that your designer used and you don't want to include everything that he gave you or she gave you, right? So you want to just remove some of the pixels. It doesn't take long. I don't expect programmers to be artists, but there's nothing wrong with being a technical artist and understanding how things work. And that's what I expect you guys to know how to do, right? So again, these blue pixels are so dark, probably they won't show up on our map, but we may have to come in here and do a little bit of fixing later, right? So I'm going to kind of move over to this one. Almost done. This one might be a little bit worse. Let's just do the inside first for this one. So let's, I mean, I can try and go over 100, but you can see that there's no 120, right? I mean, even if I go to 200, I mean, it doesn't do much more. Well, maybe that's not bad. I lose a little bit of browns, but maybe 180. Let's go 180. Still the same. That might be okay. Maybe that'll save me some time. Yeah, so I'll just do one of those. So I mean, it may not be perfect, but then what I can do is I can go in there and just grab the pixels that are weird. Oops. And like these gray ones, more like smoke. Maybe I'll leave that in this time around. And this one, oh yeah, and the blue outside background. So 180, or 160. So let's go back to 40 for these ones, just to be the same. And this one's 40. And then these ones over here are more. Let's go to 160 again. I want to kill everything because sometimes we'll get the other ones too, but that might be okay. And oh, that's really, we're in trouble here if we do that. So let's go back to 40 for that one. And you know what? I'm going to leave that one as 40, right? Because especially this one. This one's definitely just a 40. Because see, there's just these islands, right? So the more we take away, you won't actually see the explosion. We want it to look black anyway. So there we go. So we have our explosion. It looks like this. It's not perfect by any means, but I wanted to show you how to do this. Now, how do I get this explosion as an animation? Well, we need to cut these out. So we're going to use our crop tool. Actually, let me go zoom in there again. Zooming in is great because what it allows us to do is really get close to the pixel level. And, you have the ability to do this. So you can see I have my crop tool. I'm going to go as pixel perfect as I can. And that's pretty good. I'm going to make them all the same size. Right now, I'm going to make it this size, and then I'll come and maybe cut them all smaller. Actually, I'll probably leave it like this. So double click. You can see that I have this now, right? This little shape. So I don't have the other ones. And I'll say File, Save As. And I go in the same area where 1942 is, this 1945, I mean. I'll change this from a bitmap into a ping file because otherwise I'll lose, it'll just turn white. So all my work will be destroyed. If you left it as a BMP, there's no transparency, there's no alpha channel on the BMP, right? So you'll see everything white again, which would be like everything I just did to remove the blue, it'll just be white, right? Which is a bad thing. Okay, so then I'm going to change this to explosion 1. So we'll put this explosion. And now it's a big explosion. So we have to think about this. There's a big explosion and a small explosion. So big explosion 1, let's say. And save it. And then we'll undo. We'll go down to that area and we'll go to the next one, right? So we'll go to the next one. We'll do our crop tool. We'll crop in there. Right, there it is. Double click. And I'll say File, Save As. And you can see that now, well, we saved it with that kind of thing. I don't want to use I don't want to append fireworks. I want to go big explosion 2, right? So we can have a sequence. Now, why the sequence? Because Texture Packer really loves it, number 2. And also, it's easy for us to know the sequence of our explosions, just in case we want to do some troubleshooting. There's different names that you can use, like a naming convention. But I find that this is pretty good. So here we go. So there. And then we're going to File, Save As. So this is the frame by frame animation. So let's just go into explosion 3. There's 7 of these frames. Okay. Undo. And just take your time when you do this kind of stuff if you're doing it from home, right, or whatever. For your own animations, if you've got an animation seat, or let's say your designer is doing them. The other thing to think about is if you're making this from scratch, you take your original image that you've made and you just remove stuff. Like if you're making an explosion, you just modify slightly every single frame to see a difference, right? So that's the stuff that you would see, almost like a page flip animation. So this is almost look the same, but now we're explosion number 4 because they're kind of getting less and less. That almost looks the same actually, but I don't know. Maybe I messed up. So undo. Get the same one twice? I can't say. 3, 4. Let me see, did I do that? Okay, so well, we can pull them up and check, right? So if I did the same one as I'm talking and doing this, let's pull them all up. You can do that with any tool you have. So I want to kind of pull all these ones up. And you can see that they're going to pull up all the animations here. So let's look at the number 1 first. So you can see how small they are. This is the actual size. So this is explosion 4. This is explosion 3. And by the way, what's my problem that I have when I'm pulling these up? Yeah, what the heck? Why am I getting white? Well, my canvas might be white. My canvas color might be white, but in this case it's transparent. So that's weird. That's a good check. That's good that we checked that, because even though I saved it as a PNG file, still a BMP. I can tell because there's no, the white channel is still there. Look, that's what it was saved like. So that's really bad, right? I'll have to redo them anyway. Okay, so that's that one. That almost looks, that's not as bad. Did I capture everything? Yeah, no, I did it right, but I just, unfortunately, it's not really saving out as the right kind of animation, which is not what I wanted. All right, so that's not what I expected. Okay, well, let's try that again. So just going to go in here and crop that file, and then file save as. That is really weird. Yeah, it's a flattened PNG, that's why. I don't want a flattened PNG. I want a Fireworks PNG. Fireworks PNG includes, like I said, it includes the transparency. Flattened PNG makes it white. So it's there's different versions of the PNG format. So that's the one I want. And just replace it. Just get rid of these. And I'm going to undo that one, right? And now let's load it just to check it, because I'm a nervous guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. So file, open. Let's go explosion 1. Yeah, that's what I wanted. See that? So that's gone now. So I don't have the background. Okay, so that's good. So let's move on to number 2 again. Sorry for the redo, but sometimes this happens, right? You want to save it as PNG and you didn't do it right. So that's the problem. So file, save as, and the Fireworks PNG, we're just going to choose explosion 2 and undo. I know it's like watching paint peel when you're doing some graphic manipulation, but it's required. You guys have to do it at times, right? So now, can you find perfect assets? Absolutely. You can find perfect assets yourself, right? But like online where everything's flattened and there's transparency and they're perfect and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? It's like I said, it's kind of good to know the process. Even if you're not an artist, you should know what the artists go through when they make stuff, or if they're modifying things, they should understand those things. It's good from an overall understanding perspective. So I know one of the biggest complaints I get from students is, Tom, I'd like to do this, but I'm not an artist. And I talked about this before. I think a great excuse these days, unless I'm asking you to create stuff from scratch. If I say, okay, I want you to, Vincent, I want you to create this stuff from scratch. And then if Vincent wasn't artistically inclined, although he is, then, maybe he'd say, well, Tom, I don't know how to do that, right? So that might be a valid comment if I said, okay, I don't want you just to do it. But even then, if you think about it, there's quite a lot of tutorials and everything else out there that can help you even create some of the simplest assets. I want to make a character, a 2D character. I want to find a tutorial that's out there that does that. There's tutorials out there that'll help you, right? That gives you from step 1 to step 2, right? But now, the truth is we're students, right? So we don't have a lot of time. And that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem is it's not that this stuff is hard necessarily to do a decent job, because remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're making placeholder assets. We're creating a prototype with Unity, right? We're not making the final game. You're not going to sell this game, right? It's learning how to make the game and what goes into it, right? But it's the time. You have other courses you have to take care of as well, and you're going to say, well, before me going to modify all my assets like this, like, how long it's taken me to do everything, right? It's better to find assets that are clean or buy them. Some people will buy their assets for their game. That's fine too. But, it's good to understand the process. All right, cool. So we've got our final asset. Whew, yay. Gosh darn it. All right, so we've got our 7 explosions. I'm going to undo this thing because I'm going to kind of use some of these again. And now that I've done that, going back to Unity, Unity automatically will import them. See, so I've got my explosion pieces here, right? Now, I want to make it part of my sprite sheet, because making explosions is one thing, but I want to kind of make it part of one sprite sheet. The game will run faster, especially on the web, because we're making a WebGL build, right? If you make them all as one sprite sheet, that it loads one texture, if you will. That's what it does. That's why it's called Texture Packer. All right, now, one challenge I have is that even though I've loaded the texture, I noticed last time when I went in here that, I'm just going to go zoom back out. MailPilot has this atlas, and because I loaded Texture Packer, it has all this stuff. So it basically takes the textures and breaks them out into individual objects that I can use, which is good, right? So I want to kind of import them. I've got my sprites library. Here's my sprites library with my big explosion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see them now here. Well, what I want to do is I want to bring them all into the sprite sheet here and include them in my sprite sheet. Okay, how do I do that? So go back out to the operating system. And what I want to do is in my assets, I have a sprite sheet. And if you're using Texture Packer like me, I saved a TPS file. That's a Texture Packer file. And if I double click onto it, then I will get, hopefully, Texture Packer opening up in a second. Hey, there it is, with everything that I had before. Wonderful. So now what I want to do is drag and drop my new textures, the ones I just created. So I'm going to go back to my sprites. So these are my explosions. And I noticed that they've, the meta tags are all from Unity. Those are the ones that Unity keeps track of. So it kind of creates almost a map for these ones. But I want to kind of drag and drop all these, oops, not that one, all these textures that I just made in with Fireworks. I want to drag them into my sprite sheet here. So I'm going to drag and drop, right? And then you go, and you can see that it's pushed the sprite sheet and made it different. Okay. Well, it's not complete yet because I have to publish the sprite sheet. Go back to where that sprite sheet is. Let's make this bigger. So this is my sprite sheet, right? And you can see that it's just a collection of textures that's all in one page, right? Now, again, my algorithm is max rex. I'm not changing any of this stuff that my presets from last time. My publish settings I'm a little worried about because I don't know where it's going to publish to, right? But it looks like it's going to assets, sprites, see users, desktop. This is where it is. And it looks like it's adjusted because I remember I did this on the Mac, so I may have not produced properly, right? Anyway, for now, we're just going to publish the sprite sheet, right? So this is the results. It's published everything. And if I go back to Unity, I should see, if I click away and click back, you should see my sprite sheet. Let's see if my sprite sheet changed. Maybe I have to re-import this thing. Sometimes I have to do that because it doesn't check. I have to re-import. Let's try re-importing. Because it should detect my changes if it went to the right place. I'm not sure if it did. MailPilot Atlas. Did it put it here? Yeah. Okay, put it in the wrong. It put it in the wrong folder. And that's fine. I mean, it did do it. It just did it wrong. So I'm going to kind of put these two files. I'm going to drag and drop them back in. Let's kill this one. Oh. Yeah. No, let's not do that. Let's go back. because I have other sprites that are depending on these things. So if I do that, it's going to cause a problem. So I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm just going to delete that and do it again. Delete. Let's go back into Texture Packer. That's why I kept it open, because I didn't know where it was going to go, and make sure that it goes into the right space. So instead of it going to sprites, I want it to go into Sprite Sheet. Right, save there. Yes. And instead of going into, that's the texture file, right? It's a Sprite Sheet. Same thing with the texture file now. Instead of sprites, I want to go into Sprite Sheet and save that texture file there as well. So then when I publish, it should be able to overwrite that texture file. And now when I go back into Unity, I should see all those sprites there. There we go. Okay, so we got our texture, our files. We're ready to make our explosion animation. Wow, that took a long time to put everything together, but that's what happens, right? You gather your stuff, and now you're ready to, you have your assets, and I can kind of drag and drop them and make my explosion. So I'm going to take my explosion from explosion 1 to explosion 7. And here's my scene. I want to drag it either into my scene or in my hierarchy, one of the two. And when I do that, it's going to ask me to create a new animation, right? So instead of it going to Sprite Sheet, I want it to go into animations. We're going to call this the explosion. Big explosion, actually, is what we should probably call it, big explosion, right? Anim, save. And what it's done is in my animations, I don't need this right now, but if I go into my animations folder, I should have a big explosion clip and a big explosion animation, right? So the animator itself, like I showed you, has this big explosion, right? There it is. And the great thing about this is if this big explosion itself is the animation that's going to play, and I can test this because if I look at the game itself, here's the scene, right? Let's go into where that scene is. It's right here. So we should be able to see the animation play as soon as we start the game. Let's try this out and press play to give a sense of what it looks like. And of course, we're way zoomed out, so it's gone forever. Let's just scale back out to what it's supposed to be, like 1, or maybe even smaller. And yeah, and let's just restart the game. And there it is. That's what animation looks like. It kind of cycles forever. So it's a good view of what the animation is going to look like, right? Again, this is a 2D kind of animation, right? Now, do you see any problems with this thing? It loops, right? Which is what we don't want. We want the animation to play exactly one time, right? So how do we fix that? Again, this is before we get into even using the animation for anything else, right? We're just testing it. So we're going to here. So the big explosion itself is actually an object now, right? And if you look at the animator, it tells you which animator we're using. We're using the big explosion animator, big explosion 1, which is not really a great name. We're going to fix that. And the renderer, sprite renderer, is what's being drawn, all right? So the sprite renderer, it talks about the first sprite that's being drawn in the loop, right? This is the big explosion, okay? But inside of my animator itself, because I've got my big explosion, notice if I click on my big explosion, it shows me that I'm going to, I've got my speed. Here's my speed. It also talks about my, if I'm going to do any kind of defaults, I can make transitions and behaviors. I can do all kinds of stuff. But there's also this other loop, right? This clip. And if I look at the big explosion itself, this is the clip. And it says loop time, right? So let me go over that again, so if you didn't see that. So there's the animator. Look, there's a different symbol for it as well, right? Or look at the animators. The animation symbol looks like this. This is the animator, the finite state machine. And this is the clip. The clip has a little play symbol on it, right? Those are the different things. So I want to rename the clip, right? So I'm redoing my animator for a second. So I'm just going to get rid of this one. I want to rename the clip from to big, well, big explosion's okay, but my animator should actually be called the big explosion animator, right? That's what it is. Or the big explosion animator. Like I should put that in there. Animator. That'll be okay. Even if it's bigger, it's like at least it kind of gives you what it is. And this is the animation. Right? So animation. Or you can call it clip, whatever you like, right? And if I drag and drop this big explosion clip back in, you can see how this is the entry level. This is the place where the big explosion will play at the beginning. Now, because I've changed my clip, if I take the loop time away, it won't loop, right? Going back to my big explosion, and instead of big explosion, I'll just call this, yeah, maybe I'll call it big explosion. So big explosion, bigger explosion, what's what it really is. You can see that again, it has, these have been updated. Big explosion 1, that's not right, because there is no big explosion 1 sprite, and but that has to be updated, right? So it's this one. It's going to start off with the big, oh, actually, this is right, because big explosion 1 is the actual sprite in the sprite sheet. Okay, cool. So now let's see if that makes a difference when we play. So if I press play, and I'm playing now, and if I look at my game, you can see that it only pauses right there. Oh, okay. So that's one thing it does. So if we restart, it just plays that animation once, but it stops here, and it stays like that forever, right? So as soon as the animation's done, I want to play my animation, and once the animation clip is done, I want to get rid of it. That's what I want the explosion to do, this explosion object, right? So finish playing your animation and then get rid of yourself. Bye. Kill yourself, right? So how do I do that? And, well, let's go back to this thing, this big explosion. And you can see that I have to make a script for this, right? So what's going to happen is the sprite renderer, if you look at the sprite renderer, it's going to play this. It's the first thing that'll be drawn. But the animator has a, kind of is the thing that's going to play. That's the controller, the animator controller, right? Is going to play. And I want to detect how that works. So one thing to do is go look at our Unity API documentation. So if I go to Animator Controller Unity, right? And if I go to the Animator Controller manual, it's going to show us how it works. It kind of shows us this thing. And you can see that there's more than one animation in this example that they've got. There's more than one clip. This is the entry-level clip in this particular case, the one they're showing us, from entry to grounded. There's transition states from one state to the other. For example, if a person was grounded, when they die, or when they're falling, or when they're jumping, or when he's hanging off a ledge, those kind of things. There's different kind of states for this animation. But we don't want this. We want some kind of scripting help, right, on the Animator controller, right? So again, it talks about how to create one, right? Here's how you create one, drag and drop. Animation states, it talks about that, right? Notice that there's different motions. You can go from one state to the other, right? And what we want to do is we want to program, from a scripting perspective, the animator. So we want to say animator here in Unity, and of course, then bring it up. Let's try typing it correctly. And we want to go to the scripting API. Sorry, that's the one we want. So animator. Okay. Go. And the scripting API gives us what the class looks like. This is important when you just do this. So for example, the animator has a bunch of properties: culling mode, body rotation, gravity, weight, human scale, is human, is optional, all these other things here, pivot positions and root positions and so on. And there's a bunch of public methods, crossfades. We can get behaviors, get current animator clip info, right? We want to find a way of, is there anything that basically allows us to, here's play. So that allows us to play the animator, the clip, right? And I'm sure there's going to be a stop, set IK position, set integer, and there's an update. It updates everything. And is it enabled? Is it disabled? Here's the transform, some other public methods. These are inherited methods from the game object, right? That's what this is. These are static methods. Destroy. We want to be able to destroy the animator, destroy the object, and we want to be able to instantiate it. We want to tell if the animation's clip is stopped, right? So that's what we want to do, right? When we play the clip. And for this one, we want the animation itself. Animation. Animation. Here's the animation, right? And it tells you some stuff to play the animation. So animation, you can get the component for the animation. And for each state, we can set the speed. That's what this little thing does. But we want to, if we're not playing an animation, is playing, right? So if playing if it's false, I want it to destroy, right? So that's what we want to kind of do. It allows us to detect when the animation is playing. There's the public methods. If is playing is true, then is the animation named name playing, whatever the name is, whatever. I can play or stop, rewind, all these kind of things that I can do with my animation, which is great. So I want to kind of zero in on the animation that I've got for this thing. Okay, let's try this out. So let's go back to that. So I'm going to go back to Unity. I have some hints about what to do. And why am I showing you this? Because you're going to try to do something that I'm not showing you how to do. And what you need to do sometimes is go through the Unity scripting API and look through it and go, okay, I see what I got to do here. I got to do this. All right, so now I have my big explosion, but I want to add a script. Remember how it works with objects in Unity, right? Each object has its own script. So I want to add a new component. And I want to add a new script. So let's say a new script. Actually, I will, instead of doing that, I'll go into my scripts and I'll add a new script, create C# script. And I'll call this the explosion behavior, big explosion. Big explosion. I'll make it capital like I did everything else. Big explosion controller, we'll say. There we go, just keep the same naming convention. And when I open this up now, again, from my default, because again, I'm running this in on the PC now. My default should be Visual Studio. Let's see if that works. Oh, okay, Visual Studio 2015. I would have preferred 2017, but that's fine. I can change that later. All right, so when this comes up with Visual Studio 2015, what I'll get is just like before, just like when I was using Visual Studio Code or MonoDevelop. You can actually use MonoDevelop here as well, which is the built-in editor from Unity. And just while this is loading, I can show you where to change that. I believe it's under Edit Preferences and under External Tools. Let's go back to that for a second. I'll come back to you in a second. Under External Tools, it's not letting me. There. I can change from Visual Studio 2015 to MonoDevelop or Enterprise or something else like Visual Studio Code, right? If I want to. I like Visual Studio Code, but one of these is fine. I'm going to choose Visual Studio 2017 next time. There we go. So I want to have that one as my main one. And I'm going to close this down because, not that I don't want to use 2015, but there's some really cool things in 2017 that I prefer. So I'm just going to wait till that's done and then close it down. It takes a second for everything to launch properly. All right, let's just do that again. There we go. I have 2015 for backwards compatibility with some projects for students. That's why I keep it. Because sometimes their target is 2015 and I want to change. Okay, there we are. So that was much faster, like I said. Okay, so here we go. So we got our empty project. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you guys to see this so you can see the scripting. You guys all see that? Should be big enough, I think. I don't care about the solution explorer part, so I can put that away. But what I do care is on start and everything else. So what I want to do here, and then I'll do this little thing. We'll take a short break after this, okay? I want to be able to detect the explosion. So the explosion itself is a game object, right? And in the explosion itself, what I want to look for is the animation clip itself, okay? And I only have one animation clip that I'm playing, right? So go back to Unity. And just to notice this again, so go back to the component. Remember, for game objects, every game object has a transform. It talks about the rotation, position, and scale, or the other way around. I have a sprite renderer, and I have an animator. That's what I have, an animator. And I also have, inside of there, some kind of animation, this big explosion animation that I want to play, right? That's what I have. So I want to be able to detect my big explosion animation somehow, right? Because I want to be able to go to my animator or my animation that's part of my animator, right? Animator.animation, let's say, and play or stop or detect if it's playing, all right? So let's make some kind of reference. So if I go to animation, right? If I type animation, I'm typing this out. So I want to kind of get a reference to it. And I want to call this the explosion animation, the explosion itself. Right, so there's my explosion, right? I want to make this public. And I get this underlined because it says a namespace cannot directly contain members such as fields or methods. Of course, because I've put this out here, and this should be inside here. I'll be okay. Oh, that was bad. And yeah, so this is my explosion. It's public. So these are, we can say this, these are public properties. You can also remember we also talked about how we can properties. We can also serialize members, so we can actually show them, and we want to make them private, right? So if I want to make this private, well, that's just what it should be, as an example. Then remember we did that. We just kind of serialize field. So if I kind of type in serialize field, right? That's what I want, which will serialize this one. That's what it is, so we can see it in the inspector, right? So if I immediately stop that or save that, going back to Unity, and then I drag and drop my big explosion controller on my explosion, so make sure my explosion's kind of on, and then I drag and drop my big explosion controller on here. There we go. You can see that I want an explosion, some kind of animation that I want to play. Now, there's some problems with this because my animation is right here. This is my big explosion animation. So it's almost like I got to grab this explosion and drag and drop it onto here, right? Notice that I can't really do that. However, what I can do is, if I want to try and pick my big explosion animation right here, I can try and drag it in. The problem with that is that it doesn't connect. So if I kind of do one of these, and notice that my big explosion animation doesn't fit right in here. Why is that? Well, I'm looking for an animation. I made it private. If I make it public, it won't change anything, by the way, but just to show you the differences, right? Will this stop it? And why isn't this working? Because I'm asking for an animation. These are clearly animations, right? That's what they are, right? But I still can't drag and drop these animations, these explosions. And the same thing goes with, I can't drag this from here to there, right? This won't work either, this kind of drag and drop situation, right? Even if I drag this whole thing and put it in there, that's also a way of doing it, right? I can't drag this, and I can't drag that. It won't work. And it says this kind of, the symbol, I'm looking for an animation, right, in my scene. But even when I select it, like I showed you, like, for example, my big explosion animation, it won't kind of go to this. And the reason for this is because an animation, it's almost like I want to be able to control my animation, right? But I really need my animator for this, because my animator is the finite state machine that has my animations playing. All right, so let's change this. Instead of animation, we'll have my animator. Right, here's my animator. My animator will be the explosion controller, right? And remember, now we have to be careful because explosion controller is here. We'll just call this the controller. We're making a short name for it, right? Okay, there's my animator. Let's see if I can do this now. If I kind of go back here, and can I drag and drop my explosion, this one here, can I drag this one in here somehow, like this one, or this one? And yes, right, you can get a big explosion animator now, right? So we can see that that's the animator. We have a link to the animator. Cool. Once I've done this, the controller, what can I do with my controller? Well, I have access to my controller. And if I go dot, you can see that I can do things like all these things, right? But what I really want is I want access to my clip, right? Because my animator itself, my controller, right? All these things has access to the clip. And the clip is called controller, which is kind of weird. So animator, controller. The controller itself is what I want. Do I have a controller? Right, if I type in controller, is controlled, right? Runtime animation controller is parameter controlled by curve. I don't care about that. How about other things like the animation? Well, there's the animation, right? So controller animation, right? Dot, and then can I look at the, what else can I look for the animation? Do I have to go to the animation itself? Animation. Hold on a second. Let's see how low we can go. Animation. This isn't right? Because that doesn't make any sense, right? So I'll go back up to here. Right? But I'm showing you that this, like, just by looking at this, you can I tell what it is, right? So we want to kind of know if it's playing or not, right? That's what we were looking for. We want to get the transform. Here's the animation. Here's the collider for the animation, whatever it is. But that's not what we want. We want to see if the animation clip itself, right? Because now you can see there's get components, right? Get component, get hash code. I want to see if this animation clip is playing. So here's the big explosion. We're looking at the animation itself. I have access to something called an animation, right? But I want to know if the animation clip is playing. Going back to our documentation. Here's our documentation. You can see that one of the public methods for the animation itself, and again, this is the animation class with a capital A, right, is playing, right? So notice that I could have done it this way too. I could have said animation is get component animation, and then I would have had, you know, kind of a way of getting it the other way around, right? Okay, so that's different. I mean, I could have done it that way too, but I wanted to try and make this idea of a controller so I can play or stop this animation. I know I have play and stop capabilities in my code. If I go back to the code, so controller dot, if I want to say play, I can do that. Start playback, stop playback, I can do these things, right? Playback time, I can calculate the playback time, sets the playback position on the recording buffer, right? But I don't know if it's playing or not. I don't have the detection on whether it's playing or not. I want to kind of detect if it's not playing. I want to destroy itself. That's what I want to do. We can, but like I said, when I tried to get it, I couldn't do it that way, right? So I'm just showing you different ways of trying to get access to the components, right? Guys, I know this is like a long thing, but I got to show you all the pieces so you know how to do this stuff, right? So that's not it. If I go back and make it an animation, right? But instead of making it, we don't need to make it public anymore. We can make it private, right? And we say animation, and we say, we'll call this lowercase, you know, explosion animation, right? And then I use that method. So I say something like, you know, explosion animation is equal to get components, right? Animation, right? The one that's inside of the animation that's inside of my game object that this thing is connected to, right? Okay, fine. So if I do that, can I do some kind of is playing? And I can see that, right? Is playing, right? So I can kind of detect if is playing is true or not, right? All right, cool. So let's do that. So let's detect if playing is true. So we'll do this kind of stuff. We'll get a reference to the image instead, or to the animation, and I'll say, well, if explosion animation, right, dot is playing, right, if it's true, then what I want to do is I want to debug.log. I'll say animation is playing. It'll do that every frame. So it'll do 3, 4, or 7 of those. It should do 7 of those. Else, right, this is our detection, right? Debug.log animation stopped. Okay, so let's see if that works. So if we can detect this little thing here. Okay, so run. I go back to here into Unity and play. And let's see if that works, right? Now, if we had a problem, it's going to give us a problem with our build settings. It'll kind of crap out. And it says missing component exception. There is no animation attached to big explosion. Well, we have our animator. Remember we talked about this? But we don't have an animation necessarily, right? We don't have an animation. So that doesn't really help, right? Okay, let's try this again. So this get component animation, if there was an animation that was connected to my you know, my stuff, it'd be great, but I don't have that. I do have an animator, like I said, right? And do I have access to the animation of the animator? So let's suppose I had an animator. Going back to this, public animator. Just showing you so you understand the challenges with this, right? And if I call this the controller again, just bear with me. And if I say, instead of explosion animation, I said, well, the controller is where I have the animation. Right, so here's my animation. And I do it this way. Or can I go get current animation state? There's get current, get next animation state, runtime animation controller. Which one is it? Well, let's see if it's the animation. Well, if this works. And if you notice, this won't give us the answer either. So components, it says the animation attached to game object. And then component animation is obsolete. Property animation has been deprecated. Use get component animation instead. Well, we tried that, but get component animation doesn't work, right? We don't have an animation connected to my game object, so how can I detect it? Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'll show you. Yes, we can do different things like that, yes. But let's go back, and we'll talk about this in a second. Okay, so let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how to do that.